Welcome everyone to the new JFK show number 256 as we incorporate Larry's killer hourglass, because in New Orleans I don't happen to have it. In Bay St. Louis I do. So Larry is covering our bases here.
It's a beauty, Larry.
Yeah, so tonight's show is going to be a continuation of decoding. I like to call it decoding the 2017 JFK Files. And that's exactly what we're doing. And we're taking the code words, and also by finding where they tried to black it out, but they screwed up and you can see through it, you know. So all the pieces of the puzzle are there, and you can almost read it like a book, you know, once you know what all the abbreviations all stand for. So tell us some more about all that, Larry, from last week.
Yeah, you know, once you get used to the cryptonyms, Gary, you know, it's a very good point. You know, it's kind of easy, you know, to follow the sequence here of what happened, who did what to who, you know. Mm-hmm. And last week we had started to get very, very deeply into the Sylvia Duran thing, and how the CIA Mexico City station had all the bases covered there, you know, with moles, you know, working penetration agents working inside of the embassy and the consulate. And we talked about that Little 9, who was their superstar spy inside of the Cuban embassy. That's kind of easy, you know, to, you know, once you have, you know, that kind of operation going where you have these two people inside of the Cuban embassy, and they're just obtaining all kinds of intelligence and all kinds of information for the CIA, and specifically for Winston Scott, who was the chief of station there. And what we were starting to formulate here is an organization, and maybe we have time to sort of like show it very briefly here, an organizational chart. And it's kind of hard to piece together, but before, it was hard to piece together before the release of the documents. But now we're able to really, you know, go in there with a magnifying glass and glean all this new information and see who was responsible for what. And I think, Jim, this is a very fascinating experience, you know, for researchers who have been, you know, who've been waiting for these documents, you know, because if I've said before, we are about to redefine what happened in Mexico City.
Oh, you've been doing a brilliant job of it, Larry. I love it.
And I just realized, and I've said before, that a lot of good books came out that were written, but they only scratched the surface of what happened in Mexico City. And I'm going to mention Peter Dale Scott, John Newman. I'm not going to say Jefferson Morley because. Okay. But I just did. But anyway.
JFK community, man.
But anyway, if you wrote a book in the 90s on Oswald in Mexico City, and you went by the documents that were available, obviously you are not, you're only getting, you know, a very small percentage of what really happened there, you know. And so you have to reformulate and you have to revisit those areas that you researched, and you have to start all over again, you know. And I hope that some of our colleagues, you know, are willing to, you know, get their hands dirty, roll up their sleeves, you know, and get in there, you know. But if you don't, you're not gonna be able to, you know, update your books, you know, the way that you should, you know, as you get new information, hypotheses keep changing. Am I right, Jim? And
yep.
All right, so Larry, I know you're of Spanish descent and you're all over these Mexican, you know, the parts of the Mexican files and all that. So, and it is redefining what happened in Mexico City. Now, as far as the documents, I mean, is there other areas that we're finding out more stuff that are just as ripe?
You know, you can probably write a couple of books You know, I'm gonna put up. Let me just show you guys an example of what I'm talking about. Okay, I want to go here, and before I start my screen share, okay, and show you guys what I'm talking about. I can start a screen share here. This is not my machine. Okay. Here we go. All right. Can you guys see this?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. Yeah. Oops. There we go. All right. You see here, we're going from.
We lost the screen share.
We lost it, Larry. It was there and then it was gone.
Okay. Let's do it again. Got it there?
Yeah.
Not
I think
yet.
you got to hit screen share again. I think you turned it off somehow.
How's that?
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. There it is.
Okay. Okay. If you start at the top, you see McCone up here, Langley.
Yeah, dude, he's the man at the top.
Well,
So
we
that's
know.
the head of CIA.
And below him is a guy by the name of, they used to call him Colonel J.C. King. If you look at a lot of the documents out of Mexico City, they're going to see J.C. King, Chief of Western Hemisphere Division there, you know, and that's, so Mexico City is under that umbrella there, okay?
That's the first
Now
time I've ever
here-
seen my name in JFK.
Yeah, so here is where we place Winston Scott, and his cryptonym or pseudonym was Willard Curtis. We've talked about that before. And the guy who succeeded Scott was a guy by the name of John Horton, also known as Roger T. Kingman. And the interesting thing about this guy is that he was the actual courier for Sylvia Duran's original statement. And we're going to talk about that now in a minute. And he was in the political attaché, and he was Scott's successor. And believe it or not, when Winston Scott died, he had a manuscript. He was writing a book on what transpired in Mexico City. And when he died suddenly, all right, no apparent reason, this guy John Horton ended up at Win Scott's house, picking up all the documents that Scott had amassed there at his house. He had
Reminiscent of Angleton at Hoover, right?
Oh, he was definitely in fact, I was just going to mention he was sent by Angleton to go and collect everything that Win Scott had.
Was Win Scott writing a truthful, accurate book that they didn't want out?
Apparently, well, his wife is the one who initiated contact, Jim. And his Win Scott's wife called the company, and Angleton said, we better get our hands on that information on those documents. And they sent this guy, John Horton, also known as Roger T.
Scott's
King.
wife turned him in?
I'm sorry?
Win Scott's wife turned him in?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, Larry.
Yeah, but this was after he died. This was after he died.
Oh, you mean she but,
yeah,
but
after he died, he said, hey, my husband left a lot of these documents here. You guys want to come and pick them up? And they went running,
Yeah. Okay.
But don't you imagine he was taken out because he was doing the book, or do you think he died of natural causes?
Hey, that's an excellent point, and it's very, very, very feasible, that, they got wind of that. Maybe, he talked, with the wrong people, comments or whatever, and it got around, and and they took care of him, an apparent heart attack again. He was perfectly.
Took care of him. That's her favorite method, heart attack, Larry.
Yeah, he was perfectly healthy, by the way. Just dropped dead. So John Horton ends up going, and then so right below Win Scott, okay, we've got these four here, and the one on the right that we've already talked about, she keeps rising, okay, from the bottom here. And right below Win Scott, his top lieutenant was a guy by the name of Alan White. And if you look at the cables going back and forth from October through December of 1963, they're signed by one R.L. Easby, and that was the cryptonym for Alan White, and he was Scott's top lieutenant. Now, going here to the left, we had a guy by the name of Herbert Manel, also known as Gerald F. Gestetner, and he was in charge of Russian affairs, which included the very important envoy take for the Soviet embassy called Limerick, which we've talked about here before. Okay, and below him was his assistant, which actually was his wife, Barbara, and her cryptonym was Dillinger. Okay, Lucy. And below them, our friend that we've already introduced, Little 9, okay, is handler Robert Shaw, also known as Lawrence Barker. Okay, now here, right below Alan White, look who we find. Okay, David Atlee Phillips. His cryptonym at the time when he was in Mexico City was Michael Choden. And he was chief of Cuban operations. And that
Phillips
included—
was in charge of Western Hemisphere when Jack was taken out.
Yeah, but this was right before the assassination. This was right before the assassination. This is all taken from the new documents. So
Very interesting, because you know when E. Howard Hunt gave his deathbed confession, he said the chain of command went from LBJ to Cord Meyer to David Atlee Phillips to William Harvey to David Sanchez Morales.
That's interesting because see, now that we have, you know, a lot more documents coming out, this is where he fits into Mexico City in 1963, in November 1963. And I have a lot of documents on that. But here at the top here, right beside Alan White, and almost, you know, up there at the top is Ann Goodpasture, our good friend Robert Riggs. And she was in charge, as we have talked about before, of organizing all the take to send up to
We can call her the Wizard.
And Charlotte Bustos. Case, and now it turns out that she's case officer for the Envoy and the Liemti projects. She was station desk manager. She trained agents, okay? So she's starting to move up quite a bit here in our organizational chart. Now, mind you, that this would have never been possible had we not seen the new documents. And, you know, before the new documents, Charlotte Bustos was just, in fact, C. Bustos was just a name on a cable, you know, on a couple of cables, okay? We didn't even know who she was. And thanks to a lot of our contacts, we started to get a deluge, you know, of information on her, and specifically some really nice pictures of her, you know, and we have her 201 file. We know exactly, you know, her upbringing and how she ended up working for the CIA, okay? So this is just to give you guys, you know, whet your appetite on what the new documents are starting to, you know, form here on this Mexico City thing. You know, it's quite interesting.
I like this. I like this, Dave.
Yeah. Before we're not able to identify, you know, all those individuals, you know, and place them in a chart like that, because obviously with all the investigations, they wanted to just give you bits and pieces, you know, and keep you, you know, as misinformed as possible.
Yeah, this is the result of a laborious reconstruction.
It is, and it's going to continue. Yeah, it's very laborious. All right. So let's. Okay, I'm going to start the screen share again, and we're going to go here.
Yeah, it's like new characters, but it's the same cast of characters.
Well, you know, it's some of these people made a lot of money on these books, you know, and they didn't even have half of the information, you know. They were working with, I would say, they were working with probably 10 to 15% of the total, you know, of the real information that, especially now, all this that is coming out. So anyway, last week we were into the Sylvia Duran affair, And we were about to go into a very, very important aspect of Sylvia Duran, and which has to do with her original affidavit or statement. Okay, and you guys are not going to believe some of the stuff we're going to talk about here, because it was always a given that she went and she signed a statement. It was sent to the CIA or the FBI or both. They had people there translating, you know, all of her statement and everything, and they came up with this fairy tale, okay, which we now know of an Oswald imposter trying to get into Cuba, albeit without even putting his wife and children on the application. We were talking about that the other day, you know, because we've seen the visa application. Doesn't even mention his wife, you know. Well, you know, what do you think of that? You know, I mean,
well, it's stunning, Larry. I mean, that would only be somebody who was ignorant about Lee's actual family circumstance.
Yeah, he's gonna move his family. He's gonna move his wife. You know, you want to start a visa application. You know, a transit visa. Think about it, and you don't even write. You know, and, oh, wait a minute, he's going with his wife and kids. Okay, yeah, but
we're really getting a handle on how shabby a job they actually did in faking this, but yet it turns out to be extraordinarily difficult to unpack it and sort it all out.
Because all the documents have been all, you know,
yes,
all over the place, and the ones that have been available, I have to commend, you know, Bill Simpich, because with, you know, without the new document dump, he was able to really piece together a very interesting scenario there. You know, some of the things I'm sure he's going to revise, you know, but again, you know, that's what this is all about. So anyway, believe it or not, Sylvia's original affidavit and her statement is nowhere to be found. Okay, and we can start here at the top here.
Nowhere to be found, Larry. That's stunning.
Well, read on.
Sylvia Duran's original affidavit statement. The newly declassified documents revealed that what came out of Mexico City was a far cry from what Duran really endured during her two interrogations, 23 and 27 November 1963. As a reader will see in Duran's translated memoir presented below, that Duran interrogation did not go smoothly or without any major consequences, as falsely reported by CIA asset Mexico Undersecretary of Government Luis X. Guevara, Lee Envoy 2, in this cable.
And look who signs it. Look who signs at the top. Here's where we start to see all this, you know, structure here on the cryptonyms. R.L. Easby, and I just showed you, you know, in the organization.
Where was he at?
He was right there below Win Scott. He was his deputy.
All right. It's pretty high up there, like around Adley Phillips and stuff.
Right here. Okay.
Echeverria told Chief of Station Duran completely cooperative and gave written statement attesting to 2 visits by Oswald. Could not remember exact date, but said later part of September. Oswald showed her U.S. passport showing long stay in USSR. Said he communist and admirer of Castro, the theme. Wanted to help get transit visa Cuba, ordered to go to USSR. This is just so contrived.
So bad.
She said could only arrange transit Cuba if already had USSR visa. Soviets sold her they had further checking to do before could issue visa. Knows not why returned to U.S. without visa. Duran told she had recognized Oswald on television 22 November and told husband about visit. That's got to be false.
Yeah.
Right? She's never seen Oswald. She couldn't have recognized him on television.
Yeah.
Owing cooperative, Guevara believes will be no repercussions, no evidence embassy knows if she picked up. Above preliminary report, Chief of Station will see Guevara again morning of 24 November.
Yeah, isn't that incredible? Ambassador Mann, informed by Chief of Station of Duran pickup and delighted, will brief Odenvi. Odenvi is FBI. Obviously, we have talked about this before. And notice how envy is in OD. OD means the United States, okay? Envy. This is, I don't know if anybody has really noticed it, but there's a story there that Hoover was envious of the CIA because the CIA had a lot more global penetration, you know, that the FBI could not.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So, you know, it does not escape, you know, the sharp mind here that Odenvi.
Theoretically, the CIA was not even permitted to operate inside the U.S., only the FBI, and conversely, the FBI not abroad.
No, I know.
There were lots of variations here, and the CIA increased its influence within the U.S.
Yeah, and Hoover was obviously very envious, you know, of that.
Yeah, and man is ecstatic because the phony story is clearly in place since it's embedded there so explicitly.
Exactly, which tells you where man was coming from. Okay.
Yeah. Quite the contrary, in her personal statement, Duran described the extreme abuse, both physical and psychological, and the humiliation she and her husband endured at the hands of the Mexican security police. Where at the end of her ordeal, she was abandoned in the street to the tune of Mexican newspaper vendors announcing her having been stripped of any diplomatic immunity. Before getting into her personal statement, it's important to establish the true fate of her original statement taken by the Mexican security police on behalf of and at the behest of the U.S. government on 23 November 1963, the day following the assassination, and later 27 November 1963. Only then will we be able to properly establish the credibility and reliability of her personal statement, which was written of her own volition 15 years later, and no doubt would be more accurate than anything.
Oh, you better believe it. And we've talked about it already, you know, in the past, but I think we need to really harp on that, you know,
yeah,
now more than ever, Jim, because of all these new documents, you know, and
yeah, you're seeing the elaborate steps they took to conceal and distort what she actually had gone through.
Absolutely.
The following cable and memo shows that once upon a time, a signed statement in the form of an affidavit existed for Sylvia Duran, which was taken the night of 23 November 1963 by the DFS. In fact, headquarters was so anxious to get their hands on her statement, they requested it be sent immediately without being translated. Even under these conditions, the statement which was received was a photostatic copy obtained by the ubiquitous Luis Echeverria, the envoy too, who hand-delivered it to Roger T. Kingman, a.k.a. John Horton, who at the time was in their political section as an attaché of the Mexico City station. Horton later succeeded Winston Scott, Willard Curtis, as chief of station COS in Mexico City. Roger T. Klingman Horton's role in securing Scott's personal papers will be disclosed in a later chapter.
Here is, okay, and notice the date, 23 November 63, okay. Galbond, okay, Galbond is J.C. King, all right, chief of Western Hemisphere Division there. All right, now here's clearly here, Jim, and this is one of this is November 27th, okay. Sending photostatic copy of 10-page statement by Sylvia Duran, obtained by Echeverria by hand of Roger T. Kingman, in envelope addressed to Galbond's true name. And Galbond's true name was J.C. King, J.C. King, right? Now, Kingman.
Why would that have even happened, Larry? Why would it ever be addressed in his true name?
Well, you know, this cloak and dagger shit. You know?
Yeah, that was a F up.
Okay, yeah. Kind of amateurish, isn't it?
Yes.
The whole thing is like a Mayberry CSI.
Yeah. You know that you mentioned that it's so glaring there. You know, he should have just said address to J.C. King.
Right.
Period. You know, or Galbond, you know?
There it reveals his pseudonym, yeah.
Yeah, Kingman arrived. Yeah, I know. Kingman arriving at Dulles Airport at 800 hours, 28 November. He will be met by his wife. Hopes he will tell him what to do with the envelope.
Yeah, Sylvia Duran will tell you what to do with the envelope.
Isn't this a ridiculous? I mean, this.
It is. It's the original amateur hour.
Sorry, no time to translate statement. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Now let's get back over here. Here's a memo for Clark Anderson, legal attaché from Winston Scott. Attached is a copy of a 10-page statement of information obtained by Gobernación during the first detention of subject. Obviously, Sylvia Duran. This information is from a confidential source. It must not be disseminated in whole or in part outside your offices without prior approval from the originating office in Mexico City. Okay? 29 November 1963. So we know from these two documents that there was an actual 10-page statement signed by Sylvia Duran. You know? So what happens now is that Peter Dale Scott, and we know how sharp he is, you know, he started to unravel. He started to read everything about this and find out, you know, about the chain of custody of the statement. And he started to study all the, and notice that this is 1995, before all these new documents, which give us a lot better idea of what happened, what might have happened, okay? What appears to have happened.
Yeah. How close you think Peter was to the whole truth? 100%?
Yeah. So we can start here in 1995.
Okay. In 1995, Peter Dale Scott was the first researcher or author to question the chain of custody of Duran's statement. The ARB's Jeremy Gunn wrote, Peter Dale Scott has interpreted some of the inconsistencies in the records available thus far as evidence that there still remains an original source document which was somehow withheld by the Mexicans. In Deep Politics 2, Scott alleges that there are at least 4 successive versions or falsifications of Sylvia Duran's so-called statement. These possible falsifications are evidence of the existence of an original, suppressed version of Duran's statement. He contends that the November 23rd report of Duran's interrogation prepared by the DFS and provided to the U.S. in May or June 1964 was a falsified version, deliberately revised to bring her story into line with the Warren Commission lone assassin theory. He detected problems with the initial reporting by the DFS and with the subsequent English translations. The key suppressions he cites are the following. He was on top of this, Larry.
Yeah.
DFS-1 Scott asserts that the written statement first given by the Mexicans to the CIA station chief the night of November 23rd and summarized in the station's cable Mexi 7046 is missing from the record. So that might well have been the original authentic statement. In 1997, Jeremy Gunn and his staff had already found discrepancies to be of such importance that it exhausted all means at its disposal to obtain this document from the CIA, where ultimately on 8 October 1997, the agency was finally forced to admit that they could not produce Duran's original signed affidavit. So, the ARB simply, this is because it was too damning. It just exposed the whole thing with a scam, which falsified the entire cover story of Leah's The Patsy. So they couldn't produce it. The ARB, they have it, but they couldn't produce it. The ARB simply resigned itself to move on and declare the document is unable to locate, in other words, unobtainable, does not exist, which as I would conclude false. From this initial acknowledgement to the ARB request dated 8 May 1996, it took almost a year and a half to finally transmit a final resolution regarding the Duran document. It took them that long to figure out what cover story they were going to use.
Well, I think more is and it's part of the playbook, Jim. You know, to just stall out. You know,
stall out for the ARB. Yes.
Yeah. Well, you know, one of the most damning documents that came out was the Roca Memorandum, where he says regarding the images, the photographs coming out of Mexico City, they were not Lee Oswald. And he says, JA, JA meaning Justice Angleton, he says, let's just stall out the commission, So it's part of the playbook,
Yeah, yeah.
So this is 8th of May, 1996, and just to give you an idea, okay, attached, this is the first time that they say, hey, wait a minute, there was a 10-page statement by Sylvia Duran, and we would like to see it.
Look how recent this is, yes.
Okay.
Attached to your information is request number 11, dated May 3rd, 1996, from the Assassination Records Review Board. The request is for various types of information related to Sylvia Duran, particularly a 10-page statement she apparently gave to the Mexican government. We are searching the JFK records in our possession for the statement and related items, and will consult with you on the results of the search, meaning it's ongoing, and they can claim that interminably and, never produce it. Was her original statement then 10 pages? I would surmise that's right.
Read on. Okay, so that's the ARB, they want to know what's going on with her statement. Finally, 8 October 1997, Jim, almost a year and a half later, okay, and this is the final resolution on the, and I think, this is something that, just completely upsets the whole story of what happened there, Jim, because once you insert, this ambiguity and this doubt into the Sylvia Duran statement, and with what we talked about last week, closing, where she's nowhere to be found, she's protected by the Mexican government and everything, the tentacles of this whole thing just go so deep, and this is something right here that I'm sure, a lot of our listeners are subscribers are just going to go, wow, I never knew about this. People don't know about this, Jim, and this is why this has to come out.
Yes, Larry, you're actually uncovering, this is like a big nugget of gold that you are uncovering from a very extensive mining operation. Dear Mr. Gunn, this is the agency's response to referent request and to modifications to same as contained in your letters to me dated 7 and 27 October 1996. Referent request was for all files, documents, and records that relate to Sylvia Duran's first arrest and interrogation in Mexico City immediately following the assassination. In particular, you sought a 10-page statement she may have given to the Mexican police. All records within the JFK sequestered collection which were responsive to the request were identified and provided for review by the ARB staff. Following that review, your focus narrowed down to the Duran original statement. This 10-page statement was apparently thought to be something given by Duran in the nature of a confession in a criminal matter. That is, her own words were either recorded, handwritten by her, or contemporaneously written by someone else. No reason it has to be a confession of a criminal activity. That's ridiculous. Despite the concerted search described below, no such statement has ever been found, and we cannot confirm that it ever existed. Rather, the various descriptions and agency files of a statement or records of interrogation probably refer to the same event, a 10-page report in Spanish written by the Mexican police as a record of their interrogation of Duran. Do we then have that, Larry?
No, no. What we have are synopsis, where we have our reports, where we have our supposed translations, but we do not have the actual affidavit in Spanish.
Yeah, but do we have the police report, 10-page report?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Have we read that yet? I mean, I would like that's rather.
No, we haven't presented that yet. That's something that but it's still it's also in the new release.
Okay, are we gonna have it tonight?
No.
Okay, well, continue. Yeah, scroll.
Okay.
The agency's Directorate of Operations conducted a review of its files to determine if a Duran statement could be found. The DO advised that it search its main index system and its names database. From that, it attached hard copy files, including the Duran and Oswald 201 files. No Duran statement was found. In addition, HRG searched its Oswald and JFK collections to determine if there was a second document, one different from the 10-page report described above. Again, multiple copies of the 10-page report were located but no document which could be called a Duran statement was found. If you have any questions, this is just a cover up to explain that they're, you know, that they're not going to let you have it.
Of course not.
I mean, what could be more obvious?
Of course not. But then now I wanted to hear the Marr. There's a woman by the name of Irene Marr. Was one of Jeremy Gunn's
associates?
Yeah, researchers. And she was sharp. This woman, and you don't hear, and nobody hears anything about her, you know, but this is, again, this is all in the new documents.
I've never heard her name before.
Yeah, she's moved on, you know, and
is she still alive?
Yeah, she's alive. She worked for Jeremy Gunn in the 1990s for the ARB.
Maybe we could have her on the show.
If we could find her.
The Marr investigation of Duran's statements. Additionally, a little-known 17-page report by Irene Marr, addressed to Jeremy Gunn in 2017, raised serious questions about Sylvia Duran's original statements, 23 and 27 November 1963. See Kathy _ Duran.
Yeah, that's just the name of the file.
Yeah. Marr extensively followed and itemized the document trails, painstakingly analyzing each cable and memo in chronological order. Memorandum.
And that's not easy. That's not easy to do, Jim, because since everything is so scattered about, you know.
Yeah.
The importance of Irene Marr's work here is that she went and she did sort of like what Sylvia Marr did with the by indexing the Warren Commission volumes, you know, but in a much smaller scale. What she did was she went item by item, and she did like a chronological order. I don't want to, you know, really spend a lot of time here, but basically, you know, everything that she expressed here, you know,
is well founded. Yeah,
has to do exactly with
what the documents reflect. Yeah.
Yeah, and
for example, suppression of the original statement. Yeah.
Have been interpreted to suggest that Sylvia Duran was arrested and interrogated by the DFS on 2 separate occasions. Although records on Duran's arrest and interrogations are included in the JFK collection, the question nevertheless remains whether the collection includes all the earliest documentation of her November '63 statements taken by the DFS.
It does not. Yeah.
It does not.
Yeah, so we can continue here.
Okay, records documenting the November 23 interrogation. There's a proliferation of material in Sylvia Duran and contained within the separate collections of assassination records, including reports covering her dealings with Oswald, phone calls to the Soviet consulate, and her arrests and handling by DFS. The following summary is intended to concentrate on those records that specifically deal with the question of the November 23 statements. The principal records and highlights of their contents documenting the November 23 arrest and interrogation are as follows.
And this is very interesting because, like I said, this is something that's had never been done before. And this is information that comes out from the newly released declassified documents. And she starts from the beginning, from the top, and she identifies the document and everything. And she says, she gives you a synopsis of what everything contained, you know, and when you finish this, you know, this is a really impressive, you know, body of work here by Irene Marr.
Let me go through the key. Mexico Station informs HQ that Sylvia Duran should be arrested immediately and held incommunicado until she gives all details of Oswald known to her. Clearly. Don't
forget that last week we actually showed our audience that cable. Remember, incommunicado?
Yeah. Then that's the 23rd. Here again on the 23rd, but 8 cables later. Echeverria informed Chief of Station Duran and her husband had already been arrested. He promised all information obtained from Duran's first report should be ready by 2000.
Let's not forget that this Echeverria scumbag was, you know, the envoy too, and he was a future president of Mexico, and he worked for the CIA, you know, and he.
God, there is just amazing. God.
You know, and it's like the fox, you know, guarding the chicken coop, you know.
Indeed.
The CIA really had it made in Mexico City. You know, they had the presidents of Mexico for 20 years in their pocket. They had moles inside of the Cuban embassy, you know, and they still screwed this whole thing up, Jim. You know?
It's amazing. Then here about, let's see, 9 more cables later, Mexico City informs HQ that Echeverria reported Duran was completely cooperative and gave written statement attesting to 2 visits by Oswald. Note, this was a station preliminary report and gave a brief synopsis of Duran's testimony, including the statement, said he communist and admirer of Castro. Report also noted Chief of Station will see Echeverria again the morning of the 24th.
Nothing but stupid ass rhetoric, you know, shit that, you know, they put in cables, you know, just to, you know, pad everything, you know, and keep the, you know, this.
They had a phony story and they were sticking to it.
Yeah, and the patsification here of Lee Oswald, obviously, you know, where they're building up this legend, you know, that doesn't exist, you know, and, you know, it's just very sad, you know, that we have to, you know, reveal.
This is just so bloody revealing, Larry, that anyone familiar with this aspect would realize the whole thing was a fraud.
Oh, you got
that
it.
Oswald was totally framed, that he had nothing to do with it. He'd never been to Mexico City, and they made it all up.
And the thing about this, Jim, is that you have authors who have written books based on that crap that came out, you know, before all these documents started to come out, you know, still, you know, adhering to the shit that Sylvia Duran, you know, screwed Lee Oswald, you know, that she was promiscuous, that she was this, she was that, you know. Last week we revealed that they actually tried to recruit her, all right? And, you know, in between, you know, right before the assassination and right after the supposed Lee Oswald visits to the Cuban consulate with the visa thing, you know. So I found that to be extremely revealing there, Jim, you know, where, you know, this whole thing now starts to unravel in a whole different way. And these authors, you know, and I'm going to say the guy that runs the JFKFacts.org website, you know, have published books, you know, and if you go and you look at what they've published, you know, and they say, oh, you know, Sylvia Duran saw Lee Oswald, she tried to help him, and then she went and got into the sack with him.
Yeah.
You
I'll
know?
tell you how bad this becomes. Judith, at one point, showed me a photograph of Sylvia and was conveying to me how Lee was such a master with women that he'd even had sex with her. And Judith was like proclaiming this a good thing, you know.
Yeah, and you know why? And you know why she says that it's a good thing? It's because he was feeling her out as a spy, and he was trying to get information from her.
Well, it's because, remember, the one issue where I've told Judith very early on where I disagreed with her was her claim that Lee had gone to Mexico City. And remember how she freaked out over that, Larry. She freaked out over that. That became a big effing deal. And I think now we're discovering why. It's a key to unraveling the whole damn charade.
But seriously, again, and we've mentioned this, if, you know, you had David Ferry, who was a pilot. You had, you know, jets, you know, private jets. They could have just taken Lee, or, you know, to drop off, you know, if it was that important. And you had such important people like Dr. Oshner, you know, and Mary Sherman involved in this thing, you know, and Oshner being, you know, so close, you know, to people high up in the CIA, that they wouldn't just, hey, you know, instead of sending a lowly operative, you know, on a long ass bus ride, it doesn't make any sense, you know?
Larry, Oshner has to himself be high level CIA.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
He's not just close to, he is.
And if he was, then why didn't he just, hey, snap his fingers? Hey, you know, let's get Lee on a jet, you know, and send him to Mexico City. Or, hey, David Ferry, you know, do this, you know, take him down there, you know? Hello?
Agreed. Okay, now on the 23rd, Well, that's the story one we've already read.
Yeah,
26.
you're right here.
3 days later.
November 26.
Yeah. Mexico City, Mexico Station 4 is the headquarters copy of report by source, Leon Boy 4, I take it, for
Boy 4, yeah.
2. This appears to be the first transmittal of the 10-page summary in Spanish of the results of the interrogation of Duran and the other subjects also detained by DFS. Sure. This version was prepared with a cover memo signed by JKB and noted that source advised he interrogated Sylvia Duran on 2 occasions. However,
when it says the other subjects, they're talking about Sylvia's family, her husband, you know, her in-laws, you know,
right.
all of them.
Right.
Heard
but she's noticing that by this date, Duran had only been arrested once.
Right. Yeah, because then she was rearrested on the 27th.
According to this report, Duran stated Oswald said he was a member of the Fair Play for Cuba, but there was no reference to Duran saying that Oswald was a communist and admirer of Castro.
Mm-hmm. So then, 29 November 63, a rush translation of a 10-page report by Mexican police interrogation. This is a translation. This is not the actual document.
Rush translate.
Disseminated from the CIA to the White House, DOS, FBI.
Oh,
now, this is
yeah.
the official version. They've worked it to make it come out the way they want.
Yeah.
Records documenting a signed statement was obtained from Duran. Additional records documenting a different account of Sylvia Duran's November 23rd interrogation, which were not shared with U.S. authorities at the time of her arrest, first surfaced in March 1964. This is really showing how sharp she is, Larry.
Yeah.
The version of her November 23rd statement provided by the Mexicans in March was the first instance of a Duran-only account. According to a May 18, 1964 extensive FBI report on the known facts concerning Oswald's trip to Mexico and his activities there, on March 24, 1964, Captain Fernando Gutierrez Barrios, Assistant Director of the Mexican Federal Security Police, made available a copy of a signed statement which had been given by Sylvia Duran to the Federal Security Police on November 23, 1963. This information was passed to the CIA on June 8, 1964 under a cover memo from J. Edgar Hoover to the attention of the DDP, then Richard Helms. Then we get 18 May 64 from
to director.
FBI on March 24, 64, a copy of a signed statement which had been made by Sylvia Duran to the Federal Security Police on November 23, 63 was made available according to Mexican authorities. The existence of such a statement was first reported in an FBI summary report of the investigation conducted in Mexico with respect to the travel and activities in Mexico of Lee Harvey Oswald.
Okay.
Well, she's honest. See, I mean, you know, you can have all these denials, but there shouldn't be any affirmations of the existence of a non-existent document.
Yeah, and I think our audience gets the point here that, you know, there is a problem. Houston, we have a problem here, you know?
Right. The Warren Commission staff trip to Mexico City in April 1964 was intended to gather as much information possible about what investigation were being conducted by the Mexicans with respect to activities, Oswald's activities in and out of Mexico City. As part of this endeavor, Sylvia Duran was a subject of particular interest. According to the memo, after lengthy discussions with the FBI on the Duran subject, Slauson learned it appeared that her signed statement had finally been obtained from the Mexican police. Previously, the existence of such a statement had not been known. That's an allegation. That's not a fact. Author's emphasis, we agreed we would see that later in the day or tomorrow, that it would also be forwarded through channels to the commission in Washington. Slauson also noted that a request was made for not only a translation of the statement, but a copy of the statement itself.
Hello, that's right. We want to see it.
That's right. That's very good. That's very important because then they can verify whether or not the translation is right.
Of course.
It's easy to commit mistranslations. Happens all the time.
Yeah.
26 May 1964, Chief of Station, Mexico.
Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, Jim. I'm sorry to interrupt, but yes, I do have a copy of that. It's part of this chapter, and we're going to see it now. Go ahead.
Okay, the Mexican summary.
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to put it up?
Yeah, it's right after this.
Oh, okay. 26 May 64, Chief of Station, Mexico City forwards to CIA headquarters a copy of the official Mexican government report on actions taken and investigation made after the death of President Kennedy, which will be sent to the Warren Commission. The cover memo notes that the report was a response to the request made to the Mexican Gobernacion by the 3 staff members of the Warren Commission who visited Mexico in April.
And the 3 staff members were Coleman, Slauson, and Willens.
Documentation indicates that the reports were submitted via diplomatic channels. In this version, which was provided in Spanish, the text concerning Sylvia Duran was summarized within a confidential memo, but certainly could not be mistaken for an official signed statement. Duran states that she cannot remember whether Oswald said he was a member of the Communist Party. However, she does remember his claiming to be a member of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee and a friend of the Cuban Revolution. Then we have exhibit
2123 Warren Commission.
Yeah, Warren Commission exhibit. On June 9th, 1964, the Mexican Department of Foreign Affairs transmitted to the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City note number 505503, which contained supplementary information it had received by the authorities who conducted the investigation. Most noteworthy was the certified photostatic copy of the statement made before Mexican authorities on November 23rd, 1963 by Sylvia Duran.
And here again, what Irene Marr is doing is she's saying, wait a minute, document after document after document, states that there is a certified copy of her statement, and she's just building up all this documentary evidence here regarding her statement.
Yeah, it's very persuasive.
And she is going from day one, from the very beginning, Jim, So that's why I really, really consider this to be a very, very important report here by Irene Marr.
Oh, I agree completely, Larry. Apparently, the Mexican government did not include this item in its initial response to the Warren Commission's request for information on its investigation of Oswald's activities and allegation. It ultimately was published in volume 24 of the Warren Commission hearings as Exhibit 2123. The Spanish version of this photostatic copy bears Sylvia Duran's signature along the margin. The English translation was not signed. Subsequent to receiving this report, the Commission ordered a handwriting analysis to verify the authenticity of Duran's signature.
A lot of
document then in the Warren Commission.
Isn't that incredible?
Is it there, Larry? It must be.
Let me scroll down here. We've already done this here. I know I had it in here somewhere. Go ahead. Let me just.
Sure.
All right. Let's go ahead here.
If the original Duran statements are missing and cannot be located, then how are researchers and historians supposed to interpret and write this nefarious chapter of the JFK assassination? Furthermore, everything that's been written prior to the 2017-18 document release needs to be reevaluated, taking into consideration the content of the new documents as stated above. There is one pristine Sylvia Duran document that was found misfiled at Harold Weisberg's site at Hood College. It appears that those who were processing Harold's files mistook Sylvia Odio for Sylvia Duran and placed a personal account she wrote in May 1978 into Odio's directory. Yes, the document is in Spanish, so it's been translated below by yours truly. There remains a possibility that Weisberg, due to language limitation, did not realize the importance of her statement and just glanced over it. A word of caution, this is a direct translation. Present and past tenses are mixed, and she does not differentiate with quotes when one of the principals are speaking to her and vice versa, and this is all intertwined with her own personal thoughts also. Please note, she did not write in cohesive paragraphs. It's all in one continuous stream of words and sentences. In addition, A very important and incriminating Lee Oswald link to Duran was cited by the Warren Commission, and it pertains to Duran's name appearing in his address book, which is published as Commission Exhibit 18 in Volume 16. A study will be presented which puts this issue into proper perspectives. I mean, obviously it was added, it was fake. It allows the reader to decide whether the evidence is real. Here is Sylvia's translated statement written 15 years after the fact.
Now, this is quite extensive. We've already done this before, you know, but I think this, again, especially now because we did this a couple of years ago, Jim, and but now with digesting all these new documents, you know.
I don't mind doing it again.
Well, we don't have that much time, you know, but
Okay, today. All right.
But this whole thing here. And actually, I found this is a picture of Horacio, her husband, you know, and he was an Anglo-Mexican, you know, and one of the things that I have now have to consider here, because Elena Garro de Paz was Horacio's cousin, and she was the one, her and Leering 3, who Gary mentioned earlier at the beginning of the show, were the only two people who alleged an affair between Lee Oswald and Sylvia Duran, okay? And obviously, Elena Garro de Paz might have had some kind of bone to pick with Sylvia, who was, as you can see, she's a Mexican native, Indian type, and Horacio and Elena Garro, and I have to say this because, believe it or not, in Spanish, you know, in the New World and everything, the colonized Americas, there's always been, you know, this class, you know, and this
Mexican bias and class distinctions
and race distinction, I would have to say, you know, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And where Sylvia, you know, had married this guy, you know.
He doesn't look like a real pleasant fellow to me.
Well, this was after they broke his jaw the night of the interrogation.
God.
You know, they took him and
He was having trouble holding his mouth together.
That's right. That's right. This was, and we only know about this actually because of her statement. Nowhere, anywhere do you read about Horacio Duran, you know, having suffered a broken jaw from the interrogations of the DFS, you know, on the 23rd, you know.
Must have like stood up for his wife and they hit him, huh?
You know, and so again, this is all, you know, new information that you're not going to read about anywhere else.
Well, Larry, you're just doing a sensational job with all of this.
No, I think if you have,
I mean, it's hard for me to imagine your second book could be more important than your first, but it's obviously going to be of tremendous significance.
You have to get that first book, man.
Now let's look at this point right here. The Duran entry in Oswald's address book, because we don't have that much time left,
right?
You know, but I think this is really, really important here.
There's a misconception flowing around that it was Sylvia herself who wrote her name and number in Lee Oswald's address book. Of course, this originated with Oswald's address book, Commission Exhibit 18, published by the Warren Commission mentioned earlier. Her personal account shows her own ignorance of how her name might have made its way there. Obviously, she didn't write it. Otherwise, she would have voluntarily accepted this when, in fact, she expressed surprise upon finding this out. Her 1978 memoir states the following: I gave him a slip of paper with my name and the telephone number of the consulate.
Okay, now this here, which is in Spanish, it says, llenamos su solicitud. We finished his form. We filled out his form. Le doy un papel con mi nombre y el teléfono del consulado. That translates into, I give him a slip of paper with my name and the telephone number of the consulate. Okay, so again, so here, go ahead. She never
actually wrote her name and work telephone number in Lee's address book. She did, however, provide the imposter with a slip of paper with her work number at the consulate, which is something she did for anyone who came there for the same service. Moreover, handwriting analysis clearly shows it's not the same handwriting as the above entries and appears to have been entered after the fact with a different writing instrument. Given the information coming from Duran herself, there's high probability this was written into Lee's address book in Dallas the weekend of the assassination, possibly the same day as her first interrogation, 23 November 1963.
Here are the exemplar comparisons. This is the actual entry, Mexico City. And we have talked about this. We've presented this before. You can see it's very tight here where they have inserted Sylvia Duran and they drew a line here. Okay. When we look at the characters, when we look at the letters, you know, here's a comparison. The letter U, a distinctive fish hook here. Letter L, horizontal lines curves up. As you can see, the N's are different. The D is different. A's are different. R is completely different. Letter Y angles differently. Letter I major is
Look
different.
at your next sentence, Larry. Back in Mexico City, the DFS, who was in charge of her interrogation, were so intent on proving she wrote her name in Lee's address book, they had to repeatedly write her name and number. This is a disgrace.
Why do you think they were doing that? Now, here's the
Trying
translation.
to get her to write one that looked closer to the one they have in the book.
Isn't that unbelievable? Go ahead. Here's a translation of the above.
Yeah, it's just insulting. Yeah, insulting. Larry, you've done a fabulous job with this. Gary, I know we're ready to conclude today's show, but we've got so much to go.
Yeah, we'll just have to continue with part 3 next week. So JFK number 256.
You know, the
last words?
Almost down to the last stroke. You know, this is really, really revealing here, Jim, where they have the